Well, it's that time of year again. We start to feel real happy. Why? Because we're not going to work. If you believe in Santa Claus and you celebrate Christmas, you're looking forward to Santa Claus coming down the chimney giving you some presents. It's a real good time of year. So in that good time of year, we start to feel real good about ourselves. So I start to feel great. So we start making promises to ourselves about, hey, I'm gonna lose some weight. I'm gonna do better in school. I'm gonna be better here, be better there. But guess what happens? The real Merry fucking Christmas happens when all of that noise is gone, it's quiet, and it's you against you, and now all those endorphins are gone. And I promise you made about getting up early and getting after it to go lose weight, study harder, guess what? It's a lot fucking harder now. That repetition becomes a lot harder now. So a lot of us can't do things on our own. So find somebody in your life, so when you throw that towel in, they throw that motherfucker back at you and say you're not fucking done yet. Stay true to yourself, stay hard.
I'm that person you knew you always could be. How do you do that? You break the fucking mold, guys. You get the fuck out of bed when it's cold, when it's early. You do something away from the normality of what you've been doing. That's psychotic behavior. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result doesn't work that way. You must switch up the mainframe. Switch it up if you want a different result, man. Why not try it, man? Shock the system. Start with an earthquake, man. What I mean by that is, yeah, get up at 4 in the fucking morning one day. Just one day. Commit to one day. Try it. See how it feels. Getting up that fucking early when everyone else is asleep. Or it's that cold. When everybody else says, no, this is not comfortable, we shouldn't do this. You say, yes, motherfucker, I'm gonna introduce myself to it. And who that person is, we don't know. Who could it be? It's exciting, man. Because the way you feel after that, as exhausted or as how unpleasant as the experience might be, the after effect on how prideful you feel, man. That's something you're either gonna love or not. And if you love it, dude, you're on your journey to something magical, man.
Well, everybody, it's Groundhog's Day again for David Goggins. If you pan it down here, you see it's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's not a car or a person in sight. If you pan over here, it's the same thing, not a car or a person in sight. People want to know where I find my strength at, where I get my strength. I get it from a lot of places, but right now, this morning, I'm getting it from, there's not a motherfucker that's up. There's not a car, there's not a person. Everybody's in their bed, sleep, dreading that it's a Monday, hate it's a Monday, and I'm loving it. I'm loving that where everybody's getting weaker, I'm getting stronger. It's not about the running, the swimming, the push-ups, the sit-ups. It's about what those things do for your mentality. You don't get better on the daggone couch. You get better by coming out here and getting the fuck after it every daggone day. Stay hard.
They know. It's like, this is what I want and this is how I'm going to get it. But agreeable people, especially if they're really agreeable, are so agreeable that they often don't even know what they want, because they're so accustomed to living for other people and to finding out what other people want and to trying to make them comfortable and so forth, that it's harder for them to find a sense of their own desires as they move through life. And that's not, look, there's situations where that's advantageous, but it's certainly not advantageous if you're going to try to forge yourself a career. That just doesn't work at all. And so, even though on average men and women aren't that much different in terms of their levels of agreeableness by the group, if you go out and you look at the extremes, they're very different. So all of the most agreeable people are women, and all of the most disagreeable people are men. And the thing is, the extremes are often what matter, rather than what's in the middle. And so one of the ways that's reflected in society, by the way, is there's way more men in prison. And the best personality predictor of being imprisoned is to be low in agreeableness. It makes you callous. Now you might think, well, what's the opposite of compassion and politeness? And the answer to that is, I think it's best sort of conceptualized as a trading game. So let's say that we're going to play repeated trading games. And if you're very agreeable, then you're going to bargain harder on my behalf than you're going to bargain on your own behalf. Whereas if you're very disagreeable, you're going to do the reverse. You're going to think, I'm in this trading game for me, and you're going to take care of your own interests, where an agreeable person is going to say, no, at best, this is, at worst, this has to be 50-50, but I'd like to help you every way I can. One of the things that happens very often in psychotherapy, people come to psychotherapy for multiple reasons, but one of them is they often come because they're too agreeable. And so what they get is so-called assertiveness training, although it's not exactly assertiveness that's being trained. What it is the ability to learn how to negotiate on your own behalf. And one of the things I tell agreeable people, especially if they're conscientious, is Say what you think. Tell the truth about what you think. There's going to be things you think that you think are nasty and harsh, and they probably are nasty and harsh, but they're also probably true. And you need to bring those up to the forefront and deliver the message. And it's not straightforward at all, because agreeable people do not like conflict. Not at all. They smooth the water. You know, and you can see why that is in accordance with the hypothesis that I've been putting forward. You don't want conflict around infants. It's too damn dangerous. You don't want fights to break out. You don't want anything to disturb the relative peace. You know, and if you're also more prone to being hurt physically and perhaps emotionally, you're also maybe loath to engage in the kind of high-intensity conflict that will solve problems in the short term, because it takes a lot of conflict to solve problems in the short term. And you know, if that can spiral up to where it's dangerous, which it can if it gets uncontrolled, it might be safer in the short term to keep the water smooth and to not delve into those situations where conflict emerges. The problem with that is it's not a very good medium to long-term strategy, right? Because lots of times there are things you have to talk about, because they're not going to go away. And the advantage to having a well-socialized disagreeable person is that they really don't let much get in their way. So if you can get a kid who's disagreeable socialized, that person can be quite the creature, you know, because they're very forward-moving in their nature and very difficult to stop. But if you don't get them successfully domesticated, tamed, roughly speaking, by the time they're 4, their peers reject them. And that's a big problem, because your job as a parent is to make your child socially desirable by the age of 4. Like you want to burn that into your brain, because people don't know that. That's your job. And here's why. It's easy if you think about it carefully. So you imagine you've got a 3-year-old child, so sort of halfway through that initial period of socialization, and you take that child out in public. Okay, what do you want for the child? Who cares about you? What do you want for the child? You want the child to be able to interact with other children and adults so that the children are welcoming and smile and want to play with him or her, and so the adults are happy to see the child and treat him or her properly. And if your child's a horrible little monster because you're afraid of disciplining them or you don't know how to do that properly, then what they're going to do is they're going to experience nothing but rejection from other children and false smiles from other parents and adults. And so then you're throwing the child out there into a world where every single face that they see is either hostile or lying. And that's not something that's going to be particularly conducive to the mental health or the well-being of your child. If your child can learn a couple simple rules of behavior, like don't interrupt adults when they're talking too much, and pay attention, and try not to hit the other kids over the head with the truck any more than is absolutely necessary, and share and play properly, then when they meet other kids, the kids are going to try out a few little play routines on them, and that's going to go well, and then they're going to go off and socialize each other for the rest of their lives. Because that's what happens, is that from 4 years old onwards, the primary socialization with children takes place among other children. And so if the kids don't get in on that early, they don't move into that developmental spiral upwards and they're left behind. And you can imagine how terrible that is, because a 4-year-old will not play with another 4-year-old who's 2. But a 5-year-old certainly will not play with a 5-year-old who's 2, right? Because the gap is just starting to get unbelievably large. And so the kids start out behind, and then the peers leave them behind, and then those kids are alienated and outside the peer group for the rest of their life. Well, those are the ones that grow up to be long-term antisocial, right? They're already aggressive. It doesn't dip down. Now, what happens to normal boys, roughly speaking? Imagine the aggressive 2-year-old types. They get socialized, so their level of aggression goes down, and then they hit puberty and testosterone kicks in, and bang, levels of aggression go back up. And so that's why males are criminals between the ages roughly of 16 and about 25. So, and it matches the creativity curve, by the way. It's so cool. If you look at the spike of creativity among men, 16 to 25, and it starts to go down, criminality matches that absolutely perfectly. So that's quite cool. So, and the testosterone levels raise the average level of aggression among men. It's more dominance than aggression, actually, and testosterone is by no means all bad. And then it starts to decrease at about age 25 or 26, which is usually when men stop staying up late at night, stop drinking as much, develop a full-time career, and take on the burdens and responsibilities and opportunities that are associated with a long-term partner and family. And so, Well, so that's the development of what I would call predatory aggression, because I also think that the agreeableness distribution is probably something like predatory aggression versus maternal sympathy. It's something like that. So if you look at other mammals that are predators, because we're predators as well as prey animals, really useful to investigate the viewpoints of people who have opposing views to yours. Because they'll tell you things, not only will they tell you things you don't know, they'll also tell you how to see the world in ways that you don't see it. And they'll also have skills that you don't have, that you could develop. So for example, if you're an introverted person, it's very useful to watch an extroverted person, because the extroverted person has ways of being in the social world that aren't natural to you, that you can use to improve your toolkit. And if you're disagreeable, one of the best things to do with disagreeable people, especially if that's alienating them from other people, do something for someone else once a day, just as a practice, and learn how to do it. Maybe you can wake the circuit up, if you think that it's lying dormant in you, which is probably right. I think we have a very wide range of propensities within us. Some are switched on, genetic propensities. Some are switched on, but I think that if you put yourself in the right situation or walk yourself through the right exercises, you can switch some of these other things on as well. But it takes work and dedication and discipline. I would say, generally speaking, if you want to adapt yourself properly to life, you should find a niche in the environment that corresponds with your temperament. Right? You shouldn't work at cross purposes to your temperament, because it's just too damn difficult. But having done that, then you should work on developing the skills and viewpoints that exist in the space opposite to your personality, because that's where you're fundamentally underdeveloped. And that way I think you can extend out your temperamental capability across a wider range. And to me, that's roughly equivalent as bringing a richer toolkit to each situation. So if you're hyper extroverted, you should probably learn to shut up at parties now and then and listen, just to see what's going on, to see if you can manage it, And if you're introverted, well, then you should learn how to speak in public and to learn how to go to parties without hiding in the corner and saying nothing to anyone. And if you're agreeable, then you need to learn how to be disagreeable so people can't push you around. And if you're disagreeable, you need to learn how to be agreeable so that you're not an evil son of a bitch. So, and the same thing applies even in the conscientious domain. It's like if you're too conscientious, you need to learn to relax and let go a little bit. And if you're unconscientious, it's time, get out the Google Calendar, man, and start scheduling your day, right? And beat yourself on the back of the head with a stick until you're disciplined enough so that you can actually stick to something for some length of time and not living in absolute squalor, which is something that would characterize someone who's very disorderly, for example, because they don't notice. It doesn't bother them, disorder. It's like, maybe they can see it, but it doesn't have any emotional valence, and so it doesn't have any motivational significance. So the other thing you might want to think about too, if you're choosing a partner, is try not to choose someone who's too distant from you on the temperamental variables, because you're going to have a hard time bridging the gap. It's hard for an introverted person and an extroverted person to coexist. And it's really hard for an orderly person and a disorderly person to coexist, because they will drive each other nuts. Why don't you pick up? Why are you so obsessed by it? That's the basic argument. So it's useful to know about your temperament so that you can negotiate the space with your partner as well. And I don't think you should try to find someone who's exactly the same as you, because then you don't have the benefits of the alternative viewpoint. But you got to watch it, because you may hit irreconcilable differences of various sorts. And I've seen that most particularly among couples who are high and low in openness. That's a rough one. And also high and low in conscientiousness. That's another rough one, because they just cannot see how the other person sees the world.
You need to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable scenarios, okay? If you do easy things, you will have a hard life. If you do hard things, you will have an easy life. Let me say it again. If you do easy things, you will have a hard life. If you do hard things, you will have an easy life. As a man, you have to understand that we as men, we do better in environments where we are uncomfortable, okay? You put pressure on a rock, it turns into a diamond.
Let me show you this. We all live inside a bubble, right? This is our world. We go to church here, we work over here, we go get our coffee over here, we go to this park over here, we usually go over here to, hang out with friends. This is our favorite club. This is our world. This is our favorite spot on the beach. We all live in this bubble. What you gotta do to get the life that God wants you to have, You got to put more air in your bubble. You got to blow your bubble up. Expand yourself. Take yourself out your comfort zone. Do not live in your bubble. Put some more air in your bubble. If you stay in your comfort zone, that's where you will fail. You will fail in your comfort zone. Success is not a comfortable procedure. It is a very uncomfortable thing to attempt. So you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you ever want to be successful. Start putting some pressure on. Put some pressure on yourself. Get out here and get about it. Look, I'd love to sugarcoat this thing for you. I'd love to tell you, look, you can go out here and get rich, do a couple of things. That ain't happening. You got to get real doggish. You got to get downright funky if you want to make it.
If you don't fail, you're not even trying. I'll say it again. If you don't fail, you're not even trying. My wife told me this great expression. To get something you never had, you have to do something you never did.
I would like to know when you're in that moment failing and you have to keep going, what do you say to yourself?
What if? A lot of times I'll be in a 200-mile run or something like that, and I'm all jacked up. Body's broken, mind's broken, spirit's broken. I start to say, what if I can pull this off? When I first walked into the Navy SEAL recruiter's office, he looked at me and said, there's only been 35 African Americans in 70 years make it through. You know what I said to myself? What if I can be the 36th? It's the what if I can pull off a fucking miracle. What if I can become someone that no one thinks I can be? And just me talking about that, I have the hair going up on my arms because it makes me just like, what if I can be that guy that people who call nigger and this and that, and now I'm speaking at Tom Ferry's fucking event. What if? That's it. It's every day of your life just doing. No passion, no discipline, no motivation. Yeah, all these words, I hate that so many people fucking use these words now because it's watered. It's someone sitting in a room by themselves and they figure themselves out and say, God, where's passion when you're 300 pounds? Where's the motivation when you can't read and write? Where is it? So how did this happen? I just did. I said, maybe at the end of this journey, there'll be something there for me. If not, I can read. There's no magic potion. There's no, oh, let me wake up and look at some shit. No, all those words are overused. Just do. You're living. How do you want to live? How do you want to die? That's it. That's it. Period.
What are you gonna do? How bad do you want it? There's two options. To continue forward, pushing upward. And if you do, that dream is given birth, and forever you will live in the reality of it. If you stop, quit, throw in the towel, I promise you there's no distance you can travel far enough to ever find that dream again. For it is dead. And in its death, it's replaced by regret.
You put extra on top of on ordinary, and you come up with extraordinary. It's no other way. I'm sorry, but here's the fact. All of you have extraordinary capabilities. All of you. You have to decide if you are willing to do the things to put you in that category.
But where do you go to? You wake up on a morning, it's cold, it's wet, it's dark, you've got no cartilage in your knee, you've got shitty shorts, whatever it is that's the issue today.
Keep talking.
You've got these problems, right?
I need you to keep talking about what you were just saying.
It's warm on the couch.
That's
Your
it.
missus says stay in bed.
That's it.
It's comfy,
That's
it's
it.
cozy.
That's
You've got
it.
work later on. You had an argument last night. You're
That's
slightly
it.
hungover.
So this is how you level up. That's how you level up. I know there's a whole bunch of people with that right there. That fires me up. That makes me fucking happy what you just said. That brings joy to my life right there.
Why?
Because I know there's so many people that have the ability and just refuse to get off that couch. Refuse to study a few more hours. Refuse to go deeper, to go further. And that's where I gain the advantage. It's so easy to be great nowadays, my friend, because most people are weak. Most people don't want to go to that extra mile. Most people don't want to find that extra because it sucks. It's miserable. They think it's you have to learn to train your mind well beyond motivation. If you have motivation, that's great, the word. You have to have these different
or when they try to change their life in general. Because we have to understand what is purpose and what is pleasure. Both of those things are a concept.
stay hard. When I was in the military, we go on these instructor-led runs. Most of the time, we knew the start and end point. So on the way back, I started seeing people getting happy and shit because the end was near. But there were some asshole instructors that would hear the happiness and go right on past the end point. When that happened, everybody stopped talking. Heads would stop dropping. And I started taking fucking soul. At that time, I knew what happened in their minds. They were living off the hope factor. They hoped the instructors would stop running. They hoped the water was never cold. They hoped the weather was fucking good. I don't live off that hope shit. I wish the water was cold. I wish them motherfucking instructors keep on fucking running. I wish for fucking rain. When the ending is unknown and the distance is unknown, that's when you know who the fuck you are.
What's the story? Are you not happy, or you're only half happy, or?
Still to be happy about.
You're up 2-0.
Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so.
My name's Ralph, and I'm a bad guy. Let's see. I'm 9 feet tall. I weigh 643 pounds. Got a little bit of a temper on me.
Hey, you moved my stump!
My passion bubbles very near the surface, I guess. Not gonna lie. Anywho, what else? I'm a wrecker. I wreck things professionally.
I'm gonna wreck it!
I mean, I'm very good at what I do. Probably the best I know. The thing is, fixing is the name of the game. Literally, Fix It Felix Jr.
I can fix it!
So, yeah, naturally the guy with the name Fix It Felix is the good guy. He's nice enough as good guys go. Definitely fixes stuff really well. But if you've got a magic hammer from your father, how hard can it be? If he was a regular contractor, carpenter guy, I guarantee you would not be able to fix the damage that I do as quickly. And when Felix does a good job, he gets a medal. But are there medals for wrecking stuff really well? To that, I say, ha! And no, there aren't.
So cool! This animation is so real.
30 years I've been doing this, and I've seen a lot of other games come and go. Kind of sad. I think about all those guys from Asteroids. Boom, gone. Centipede, who knows where that guy is, you know? Look, a steady arcade gig is nothing to sneeze at. I'm very lucky.
Quitting time.
I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be feeling this way if things were different after work. But it is what it is.
Good job, everyone.
Felix and the Nicelanders go hang out in their homes, which he's just fixed, and everyone, you know. They go to their homes, I go to mine, which happens to be a dump. And when I say a dump, I don't mean like a shabby place. I mean an actual dump, where the garbage goes and a bunch of bricks and smashed building parts. That's what I call home. I guess I can't bellyache too much. I got my bricks, I got my stump. It looks uncomfortable, it's actually fine. I'm good. But if I'm really honest with myself, I see Felix up there getting patted on the back, people giving him pie and thanking him, and so happy to see him all the time. Sometimes I think, man, it sure must be nice being the good guy.
Subception, which was maybe something that you might regard as a sixth sense. It's sort of like propriocentric perception. And that's the perception that you have of your body as it's reacting and localized in time and space. And so it's sort of like touch, the feeling, but it's your sense of how you're reacting internally and where you are. And a lot of that is subserved by the autonomic nervous system, which is reporting to you about various states of being in your body. Rogers believed that you could use the information that's being provided to you from your body, sort of bottom up, to determine when you were being inauthentic or non-congruent. And I've thought about this for a long time and tried to sort it out in a practical manner, and what I've concluded is this. You could try this for a couple of weeks. It's an extremely interesting exercise. So you sort of have to detach yourself from your thoughts and what you say. So you got to assume, you start by assuming that what you say and what you think is not necessarily you. And of course that's just the case, because a lot of what you think, in fact most of what you think and most of what you say, are the opinions of other people. They're things you've read or things people have told you, and you know that's a benefit in some ways because you get all those thoughts that other people have spent a long time formulating, but it's a disadvantage in that it's not exactly you. Okay, so you detach yourself from that. You're no longer your thoughts or the things that you say, or maybe you're no longer all of them. And now what you're going to try to find out is which of your thoughts and things that you say are you, and maybe so you can not utilize the rest, or maybe so that you can correct the rest, because they're not representative of yourself as an integrated being. They don't take everything into account. My sense has been that you can tell when you're saying something that's not authentic by feeling out whether or not it makes you weak or strong. Now, you know, sometimes when you're conversing with people, you can say something that embarrasses yourself. Now, Nietzsche said, for example, everyone has perjured themselves at least once in the attempt to maintain their good name. Something like that. It's not an exact quote, but I've got the gist of it right. So maybe you're saying things to impress someone, or you're saying things to remain part of your political group or your social group or whatever, or maybe you have attributes, personal attributes that might be positive that you're ashamed of, and so you're not going to speak about them. So there's a falseness about your self-representation. Watch for 2 weeks and see. Make a rule that if you start to say something and it makes you feel weak, It's hard to describe exactly what that means. To me, what it means is that I can feel things coming apart sort of in my midsection, so I think it's an autonomic phenomena. And the subjective sense is of falsehood. It's like I've just stepped off the solid ground and onto something that doesn't support me well, and it feels like a self-betrayal. So that's existential inauthenticity. You can feel it right away. And then the rule is, shut up if that happens. Stop talking. And then feel around and see if you can find some words that you can say in that situation that don't produce that sensation. And it's like, you see this played out in different forms of drama. So there's a scene in The Lord of the Rings, for example, where I believe it's Gollum and Bilbo. It's The Lord of the Rings. It's Bilbo. It's The Lord of the Rings, not The Hobbit, because The Hobbit's Frodo, right? So it's Bilbo. Have I got it wrong? It's the other way around? Okay, so Gollum and Frodo, yes, are going across this swamp. And the swamp is essentially full of dead souls. And they have to step very carefully in order to not fall off the track. And the stones are sort of hidden underneath the surface. And the implication there is that in order to follow a trail properly, you have to pick your ground very carefully, and you have to test it to see if it's solid, or you'll slip off into this, well, essentially what it is chaos. You'll slip off into chaos. And that's a dramatic representation of what I'm suggesting to you. It's like, all you have to do is notice, and you have to pay attention. And so to some degree, what you're doing, in fact, is you're making your capacity to pay attention superordinate to your capacity to think and to speak. Because you might ask yourself, well, exactly what are you? Well, I said you can identify yourself with your intellect, and that's very, very common. It's sort of like the worst sin of intelligent people. But that isn't all you are. And there are lots of reasons for making the assumption that attention is a higher order function than intellect. Because attention is what teaches intellect. So if you pay very, very careful attention to what you say without bringing the automatic assumption that what you say is you to bear on the conversation, and then also to feel like you have to defend it once you say it, you'll find very rapidly that very much of what you think and say has absolutely nothing to do with you. It's the dead souls that are in that little scene that I described to you, sort of manifesting themselves in your head. They're dead ideas that other people have created, and some of them might be applicable to you. You might have the right to them, so to speak. But lots of them won't, and you're using the words as camouflage or self-defense or as an attempt to attain status in a status hierarchy or to make yourself look smarter than you are, or there's all sorts of reasons. Or to hide what you think from other people. I see this in undergraduate essays all the time. So, because the essays are full of cliches. And it's not all that obvious why a cliche is a bad thing, but a cliche is a bad thing in the same way that being possessed by the dead is a bad thing. It's like a cliche isn't you. It's something else. It's like the crowd. It's like the other. It's not living. It has nothing to do with you. And part of the reason that students use cliches is because it's easier than using your own genuine creative formulation. So you can just default to cliche use. But there's something more insidious than that, is that if you write an essay that's nothing but a string of cliches and you get criticized, then you're not being criticized. What's being criticized is the cliches, and you can hide behind that. And the part of you that's wise but treacherous thinks, well, the criticism doesn't really apply to me because, I didn't really say what I thought. And then there's this kind of sense you get that you've gotten away with something, which is a terrible thing. So when I read undergraduate essays, what I see very frequently is, especially the first essays, just nothing but cliches. It's awful. It's dull. You can hardly stand reading it because there's nothing in it that's gripping or alive. And then maybe the second essay, you can see there's a layer of cliche, and then now and then the person will be brave enough to poke up a thought of their own. It'll just sort of poke up somewhere maybe in 3 pages in. It's like this little green shoot that's barely alive. And the person is brave enough to pop it up in the hope that, maybe it won't get walloped down with a sledgehammer. And so one of the things I try to do is to point that out. It's like, look, this is something, there's a real thought here. It's a real original thought. It's something that you have the right to, because it's derived from your own experience and your own knowledge, and you formulated it in an original and compelling way. But the problem with that is that if you get criticized for that, you're just going to pull right back into your shell, right? Because that hurts, because it's actually part of you that you've exposed. And that's a terrifying thing, to expose yourself like that. But it's an absolute prerequisite to genuine communication and thought. That such empathic understanding with a person, not about him, is such an effective approach that it can bring about major changes in personality. Some of you may be feeling that you listen well to people, and that you have never seen such results. The chances are very great indeed that your listening has not been of the type I have described. Fortunately, I can suggest a little laboratory experiment which you can try to test the quality of your understanding. Okay, so this is lovely, because you don't often actually get a technique from a therapist that actually works, you know. You get sort of vague techniques, like help the person lay the cards out on the table, you know. It's kind of at a high level of abstraction. But this exercise you can actually do, and you can do it a lot, and if you do it, it will teach you to listen. So, the next time you get into an argument with your wife or your friends, or with a small group of friends, stop the discussion for a moment and for an experiment institute this rule. While you also don't have to be that formal about it, you can just do it once you know the game. Each person can speak up for himself only after he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately and to that speaker's satisfaction. Now that's so cool, because here's the typical argument. So we're arguing, I want to win, and so you tell me a bunch of things, and so then I take those things and I turn them into the stupidest possible representation of those things. You know, I weaken your argument and make you look like a fool, and then I destroy it. And that's by that, you're making your opponent into a straw man. That's the straw man argument, right? You take what they're telling you and you caricature it, and that way you can make them look absurd and make them be ashamed, and then, of course, you've set up this skinny little opponent that you can just demolish with one punch. It's really crooked, and it shows that you're a coward, because what it means is you have to have an opponent that's, you know, crippled and thin and starving and inarticulate before you could possibly win, before you could possibly progress. It's a pathetic way of having an argument. What you should do is listen to the person and help them make their argument as strong as you possibly can. And then deal with that, because then you're sure that you're taking them seriously. So, and to that speaker's satisfaction. Well, that's so cool, eh? So we're having an argument. I don't know, maybe we have an argument about who's going to be responsible for grocery shopping or for doing the dishes or for cooking or any of those domestic things that continually cause couples to be at each other's throat. It's like, so you'll have some arguments about why you should do whatever it is that you're going to do. And in order for the argument to progress, I have to tell you back what you said. And you have to agree that I put it properly. Well, that's so annoying. Like, it just runs so contrary to what you want to do. Because, of course, you want to make the other person sound stupid so you can beat them. This way you can't do that, because you have to listen well enough so you actually understood what they said. And then you have to formulate their argument so that they're willing to agree that that actually constitutes their argument. Well, that's really, it's difficult. But it's so useful, because first of all, it does mean that you understood them. And second, it immediately indicates to them that you're not just trying to win. You're trying to listen. And then they're much less likely to get all irritable and angry at you, because at least you're trying to listen. You're not making them into a fool. And, you know, often when people are trying to tell you what they want, because they're all afraid of telling you what they want, because, you know, maybe they never got what they wanted in their whole life, you know, if they've had a history of bad relationships and poor parenting and that sort of thing. They're just bloody terrified to tell you that they might actually want something. And so, as soon as you indicate to them that you actually heard what they said, and you're willing to take it seriously enough to formulate it properly, well, then it's like one step towards trust. I see, you did listen. You at least know where I'm coming from. It's like, that doesn't mean you agree, you know. Just because you understand someone's argument doesn't mean you have to agree, but at least you know what the argument is. You see what this would mean. So one of the things Rogers does continually in his therapy, and I do this a lot, it's like I listen to the person, and they kind of go through a narrative, a spontaneous narrative, often following a chain of associations, as Freud pointed out. They'll tell me a spontaneous narrative, and I'll say, okay, it sounds to me like this is what you said. And I'll try to, lay out the argument. And maybe now and then I'll ask for clarification if there's a part I didn't understand, or if I see that there's a part that seems contradictory. They said this thing here and this thing there, and I'll tell them that. It seems to me that you said this here, and I'm not sure how to put those together. I don't say, well, that makes your argument, incoherent. I say, well, I don't get how to understand that. And they kind of go, oh, yeah, because people will admit to that if you just point it out flatly, It's like, I'm not involved, I'm just listening. It's not my problem, it's a problem. And that's another thing that's useful too. The other person is entitled to their suffering. You don't get to take it away, it's their destiny. So you can listen to their problems without having to think that, you have to take them on as if they're yours. You have to mirror them, but it's their problem. It's like they have to figure it out, and that's good. You need a problem to figure out. It's not necessarily a terrible thing that they have a problem. It would simply mean that before presenting your own point of view, it would be necessary for you to really achieve the other speaker's frame of reference, to understand his thoughts and feelings so well that you could summarize them for him. And that's useful too, because the way we remember things is if you tell me a long story and I tell it back to you, I do not tell it back to you. What happens is I listen to it and I try to figure out what the thread of the argument is. And then when I tell it back to you, it's way shorter and tighter. And that means in some sense it's got all the essentials, but it's got less of the baggage. Right? That's what you're kind of doing when you ask someone to get to the point. So they tell you this long story. It's like this tree that it's full of dead branches and it hasn't been pruned, and there it's standing there, and maybe the living branches you can hardly even see, but you're concentrating on them, and then when you tell it back to them, you just tell them the part of the story that's alive, and they listen to that and they think, oh yes, that's what I meant. And then that means you've changed the memory, right? If they agree, you've changed the memory. You've divested it of all the excess baggage, just like pruning. And that's what you're doing. And so that dialogue it's mental hygiene. And that's what people do. You've got to wonder, well, why do we talk? Well, it's to exchange information. Yeah, and there's utility in it. Like if you know how to do something and I don't, you can tell me. But that isn't the sort of thing that people are doing most of the time. Most of the time they're telling their stories. This is what happened to me. Right? And then the other person will say, well, this is what happened to me. And there's this mutual attempt to organize. That's how people are organizing their brains. We organize our brains by talking. And so if you don't have someone to listen to you, well, especially if it's over a few decades, you're going to have a brain that's like a whole forest of trees that it needs a forest fire. It doesn't need just some, The best thing you can do is teach people to write, because there's no difference between that and thinking. And one of the things that just blows me away about universities is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no, you need to learn to think, because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake, and those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. So that's why you learn to write. It's like, and I can't believe that people aren't just told that. It's like, it's the most powerful weapon you could possibly provide someone with. And I know lots of people who've been staggeringly successful and watched them throughout my life. Those people, you don't want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces. And not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're going to make your point and they're going to make their point, you better have your points organized, because otherwise you are going to look like and be an absolute idiot. You are not going to get anywhere.
So let's say you own a pencil factory, I'm a worker in that pencil factory. You can have all the machinery, you can buy all the raw materials you want, but without me, and presumably many others like me, to assemble the pencils, all you would have is a pile of wood, yellow paint, graphite, rubber.
Who do you think put more in? The guy who spent millions of dollars buying all the machinery, leasing the place, making sure there was a management structure, doing the LLC formation, making sure all the tax code was in compliance, or you standing outside because you can stick a piece of graphite into a piece of wood? Now we're done.
If you can formulate your arguments coherently and make a presentation, if you can speak to people, if you can lay out a proposal, God, people give you money, they give you opportunities, you have influence. That's what you're at university for. And so that's what you do. Is you're in English, right? And yeah, in languages anyways. It's like, yeah, teach people to be articulate, because that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly be. So, and that's motivating if people know that. It's like, well, why are you learning to write? Because here's your sword, here's your M16, right? Here's your bulletproof vest. Like, you learn how to use them. But it's an endless mystery to me why that isn't made self-evident. So that's the sort of thing that can drive you mad trying to sort out.
So I pretend to teach, and you pretend to learn.
It's like there's a conspiracy to bring people into the education system to make them weaker. So I guess that keeps the competition down. Maybe that's one way of thinking about it. If your students are stupid, they're not going to challenge you.